That night, I opened the contract and saw my own signature on a $150,000 a year lease for a penthouse showroom I had never set foot in. Except I never signed it. It was my name, my social security number, and a personal guarantee making me liable if the tenant defaulted. My sister always thought I was just the quiet one in the family. She did not know I am a real estate attorney. My name is Lila Barnes. I am 33 years old, and I am a real estate attorney at Hawksley Blake LLP. I am not the kind of lawyer you see on television, the one pacing a courtroom, delivering impassioned speeches to a rapt jury. My world is one of paper, of fine print, of clauses that can build empires or quietly destroy them. I specialize in high-end commercial leases, the multi-million-dollar, multi-floor deals in glass towers that define the city skyline. I draft and dissect the language that binds landlords and tenants, ensuring my clients are protected from every conceivable risk. My job is to anticipate betrayal, to see the hidden trap 6 subsections deep. I am, by nature and by training, meticulous. I am the person who reads the terms and conditions. My days are structured, measured in 6-minute billing increments. My office is quiet, minimalist, overlooking a courtyard of gray stone and meticulously pruned maples. My emotions are similarly managed. In my profession, panic is a liability, shock is an indulgence. When I am presented with a problem, I do not feel. I analyze, I compartmentalize. It is a reflex, as involuntary as breathing. It is a reflex that saved my life that Tuesday evening. I was working late, reviewing an estoppel certificate for a client in Chicago, when the email alert chimed in my personal inbox. The subject line was innocuous, "A change to your credit report." Usually, it was just a balance update. I clicked, expecting nothing. Then I saw the words, "Hard inquiry." A hard inquiry is not a casual thing. It means someone has actively applied for credit using my name. I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold rush that settled in my stomach, but the professional in me took over instantly. The panic was locked in a box. The analyst stepped forward. I logged into my credit monitoring service. The inquiry was from a company I had never heard of, North Point Properties. And beside it, the reason, commercial lease application. A few more clicks, and I had the lease abstract. It was not a summary. It was a snapshot of the core terms. Tenant Mercer Collective LLC. Premises, the Archer on Larkspur. Penthouse suite. Annual rent, $150,000. Term 5 years, $150,000 a year. A total obligation of $750,000. My mind went blank for a second, the sheer audacity of it short-circuiting my thoughts. Then the training kicked in. Mercer Collective LLC, Mercer, my sister's last name, Tessa Mercer. I closed my eyes, took one slow breath, and opened them. I was no longer a sister. I was an attorney with a compromised file. I moved from my personal email to my work terminal, using my firm's access to commercial databases. I pulled the public records for Mercer Collective LLC. It was formed 3 weeks ago. The registered agent address was a mail drop in a strip mall. The filing member, an anonymous service, but the tenant application file with North Point Properties would have more. I have professional contacts at nearly every major property group in the city. While I did not know anyone at North Point directly, I knew their legal counsel, but I could not make that call. Not yet. That would be showing my hand. I needed the document itself. I knew where to look. In high-stakes leasing, drafts are often filed in diligence portals. It took me 20 minutes of navigating a virtual data room I should not have had access to, but the landlord's broker had been sloppy, leaving a guest portal open. I found the file. Lease draft Archer P.H. Mercer, PDF. I downloaded it. I read it. Then I read it again. It was my name, Lila Barnes, my social security number, correct down to the last digit, my address, my supposed net worth, and there, on page 47, was the clause that made my hands go cold. The personal guarantee. It was not just a standard guarantee, it was an absolute, unconditional guarantee of payment and performance. If Mercer Collective LLC, this brand new, asset-free shell company, missed a single payment. I was personally liable for the full $750,000, not just the missed rent, the entire accelerated value of the lease. They had waived my rights to notice, my rights to protest. I was, in the cold language of the contract, the primary obligor. The tenant was just a formality. I was the target, and then I saw the signature page. It was my signature, or a very good attempt at it. It was scanned, digitally placed onto the signature line. Beneath it, the notary block, a digital notarization from a notary public in a neighboring state. The seal looked legitimate. This was Tessa's mistake. She assumed I was just the quiet, bookish sister. She did not know that I scrutinized notary seals for a living. I opened a new tab. I went to the Secretary of State's website for that state. I ran the notary's commission number. The status popped up instantly. Deceased. The notary in question had died 2 years ago. The signature was not just forged. It was built on a foundation of blatant, provable fraud. The digital certificate was a fake, a simple graphic pasted onto the document. It was clumsy. It was arrogant. I sat back. The hum of my computer the only sound in the dark office. I knew the location, the Archer on Larkspur. I pulled up the building's website. It was not just a building. It was a statement, a brand new, glass-walled monolith of luxury. The penthouse showroom was their crown jewel, a sprawling space with panoramic views of the entire city, designed specifically for luxury brands, galleries, and high-end events. This was not a small boutique. This was a grand performance. I checked my email archives. I found the contact for North Point Properties leasing representative. I sent a carefully worded email from a burner account, posing as a prospective tenant broker. Curious about the status of the penthouse suite at the Archer. Heard it was moving fast. The reply came in under 5 minutes. Apologies. The PH suite is finalizing paper. We have a fantastic tenant. Mercer Collective. Moving in. We fast-tracked their application and gave them favorable terms on the build-out to ensure they could be open for the spring gallery season. Favorable terms, fast-tracked. That meant they had barely looked. They saw my name, my credit score, my pristine financial history as a senior associate at Hawksley Blake, and they saw a golden goose. They saw a guarantor who was good for the money. The scene snapped into focus. 2 weeks ago, the regular Sunday family dinner, my parents' house, Tessa was holding court, a glass of champagne in her hand, her voice bright and breathless. She was always bright, always performing. It is happening, she announced. The Mercer Gallery, a luxury concept. We are securing the most incredible space, a penthouse showroom. You will all be so proud. I remembered my parents, beaming, my father, patting her hand. That is our Tessa, always reaching for the stars. My mother, looking at me, her smile tightening just a fraction. Isn't that wonderful? Lila Tessa is such a visionary. I was the safe one, the practical one, the contingency plan, as my mother once called me in a moment of candor. Tessa was the star. And I was the one expected to pay for her light. I looked at the forged signature again, the brazenness of it. She had used my entire identity, my professional standing, the reputation I had spent a decade building, and signed it away as collateral for her fantasy. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Tessa's contact. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to confirm the final piece. I pressed the call button. She answered on the second ring, her voice like wind chimes. Lila, hi. Honey, what is up? I am so busy. You would not believe. I kept my voice perfectly flat, calm. Hey, Tess, strange question for you. I just got a credit alert. A fractional pause. Oh, that is weird. What for? Her voice did not waver. She was a good performer. It was for a lease application, North Point Properties, for the Archer on Larkspur. Oh my God. Really? Her laugh was airy, practiced. They must have mixed up our files. How funny. You know, with us both being Barnes girls, even though I am Mercer now. What a silly clerical error. I will have my people clear it up. I do not think it was a clerical error. Tessa, I said, my voice dropping. My social security number was on the application, and I just read the lease draft. It has me listed as the guarantor. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. The wind chimes had stopped. Tessa. I do not know what you are talking about, she stammered, the brightness gone, replaced by a cold, defensive edge. I am talking, I said, spacing the words, about the personal guarantee, the one I supposedly signed. A sharp intake of breath, and then, click, she hung up. I stared at the phone. That was it. The confirmation. The admission. She did not deny it. She did not scream. She fled. I set the phone down on my desk. I did not feel anger. Not yet. The anger would come later. A hot, white rage that I would have to manage. Right now, I felt nothing but the cold, clear certainty of my profession. The file was open. The facts were established. The opposing party had been identified. I swiveled in my chair and picked up my pen. I opened a fresh page in my leather-bound notebook, the one I used for client strategy. At the top of the page, I wrote the file name, Mercer Collective LLC. Beneath it, I made my list. Plan A, stop the damage. Contact North Point Properties. Submit affidavit of identity theft. File police report. Freeze credit bureaus. Notify Landlord's Council of fraudulent inducement. Void the lease immediately. Plan B, reverse responsibility. If landlord balks or has already disbursed funds, initiate action to shift all liability to the fraudulent party. Use the notary fraud as leverage to declare the contract void ab initio. Recover the $30,000 deposit. Plan C. Give the file to the prosecutor if necessary. If Tessa or any co-conspirators resist, compile the full evidence package, the forged signature, the deceased notary, the call admission, the financial records, and deliver it to the district attorney's office. This is not just a civil matter. This is criminal. I looked at the list. It was clean. It was precise. It was the exact same process I would follow for any other multi-million-dollar dispute. My sister had started a war with the one person who knew exactly how to dismantle her. Clause by clause, she thought she was borrowing my credit. She did not realize she was stealing from an expert in the very field she was committing the crime. I closed the notebook. I am not seeking revenge. I am enforcing the terms. I went back to my terminal. Hanging up on me was the last mistake Tessa would make freely. The document was still open on my primary monitor, a 60-page monument to my sister's greed. It was time to stop being a victim and start being an attorney. I was not just going to read this lease. I was going to anatomize it. I downloaded the entire execution package from the data room, the primary lease draft, the rider of additional provisions, the separate good guy guarantee, which was anything but, and Exhibit C, the tenant improvement work letter. I saved them to a secure, encrypted drive, separate from my firm's network, under a case file name, Fraud, Barnes, v. Mercer. I started with the rider. This is where the real poison is hidden. Landlords bury aggressive clauses in the addendums, knowing most tenants only skim the main lease. Tessa, or whoever she had paid to help her, had not just skimmed, they had actively encouraged this. The first thing that caught my eye was the use clause. A standard gallery lease would be tightly defined, the display and sale of fine art. This one was dangerously vague. It permitted the premises to be used for art gallery, showcase, and related private and public events. I highlighted the word events. That single word transformed the entire risk profile of the tenancy. It meant loud parties, catering, alcohol service, and hundreds of guests in a penthouse not necessarily designed for that foot traffic. The insurance implications were staggering. The liability would be massive. And when the insurance claim was inevitably denied because the use was misrepresented, the landlord would look to the guarantor to pay for the damages. They would look to me. I moved on. Section 23. Confession of judgment. My blood ran colder. This clause is illegal in many states, but not all. It is a predatory, archaic weapon. By signing this, Tessa, posing as me, had agreed that if any dispute arose, the landlord did not need to sue me. They could simply file this confession in court, and a judgment for the full amount owed would be entered against me automatically, without a trial, without me even being present. It was a pre-signed surrender. It meant they could seize my bank accounts, lien my condo, and garnish my wages before I even had a chance to hire a lawyer. Tessa had not just offered me up as a guarantor, she had delivered me bound and gagged. Then I hit the tenant improvement allowance, Exhibit C. The landlord had agreed to provide $90,000 to Mercer Collective for build-out and renovations. This was the honeypot. The $90,000 was the immediate prize Tessa was after, but the clause had a clawback. If the tenant defaulted at any time during the 5-year term, the entire $90,000, plus interest, became immediately due and payable by the guarantor. It was a lock. The moment that money was disbursed, the lease was no longer just a fraudulent document. It was a fraudulent document tied to a material sum of money. It was the difference between misdemeanor identity theft and felony grand larceny. The landlord's counsel would argue that by accepting the money, I had ratified the lease, fraudulent signature and all. This was the ticking clock. I had to stop that wire transfer. I kept digging. The SNDA and the estoppel certificate, these are technical documents, but they are critical. They govern the relationship between the tenant and the landlord's bank. By signing them, I had agreed to subordinate my rights to any lender the landlord might use to refinance the building. It meant that if the landlord defaulted on his own mortgage, his new bank could enforce this fraudulent lease against me. It exposed me to a web of third-party liability I could not even see. Next, the assignment and subletting clause. A good lawyer restricts this tightly. This lease was the opposite. It was wide open. It allowed the tenant, Mercer Collective, to assign the lease to any affiliated entity without the landlord's consent. Affiliated entity was defined as any company controlled by Tessa Mercer. This was her escape hatch. She could drain the $90,000, then assign the lease to a new shell company with zero assets, default on the rent, and disappear. The landlord would be left holding the bag, and they would turn to the only solvent name on the page, Lila Barnes. It was a plan, a deliberate, multi-step plan to extract cash and leave me with the 7-figure debt. And just in case that was not clear enough, I found the draft UCC-1 financing statement, the Uniform Commercial Code filing. This is a public lien. It is what a lender files to secure their interest in a debtor's collateral. The debtor was listed as Mercer Collective LLC, but the collateral was not just the gallery's art. It was all assets of the guarantor, tangible and intangible. They had pre-drafted a lien against my personal property, my car, my investments, my home. This was not my sister being impulsive. This was calculated. This was predatory. This was the work of someone who wanted to burn my life to the ground and build her fantasy on the ashes. But she had been sloppy, the arrogance of the amateur. I right-clicked on the PDF file. Properties. Details. I examined the metadata. The file was created 2 weeks ago. The author, Tessa Mercer, and the last digital signature, the one applied to my notarized signature block. I traced the IP address. It was not a sophisticated proxy. It was the public-facing IP address for Tessa's home internet service. She had committed federal wire fraud from her own living room. Now, the money. Where did the initial $30,000 deposit come from? A shell company would not have that kind of cash. I pulled up the wire transfer receipt attached as an exhibit. The originating account was not Mercer Collective. The wire was sent from our mother's primary checking account. I felt a sharp, sudden pain in my chest, a crack in the professional ice. Our mother, she was in on it, or more likely, Tessa had spun her a story. I looked closer at the wire memo. It did not say lease deposit. It said consulting retainer. Tessa was already laundering the money, using our mother as a shield. She was implicating her in the fraud. This changed things. This was not just me versus Tessa. This was me versus my family's chosen narrative. I had to move. I could not just call the landlord and scream fraud. They would circle the wagons. claim they had a valid contract, and tie me up in litigation for years. I had to approach this from within the system. I was an attorney at Hawksley Blake. I would use the weight of my position. I opened my work email. I found the name of the general counsel for North Point Properties. I composed a new message. My tone was not accusatory. It was professional, colleague to colleague. Dear Counsel, I wrote. My firm, Hawksley Blake, is conducting a routine internal compliance review regarding a potential identity theft matter affecting one of our senior associates, Lila Barnes. It has come to our attention that her information may have been used in connection with a lease application at your Archer on Larkspur property by an entity known as Mercer Collective, LLC. To assist in our investigation and to ensure compliance with federal anti-fraud and Patriot Act verification protocols, could you please provide our compliance department with the full, unredacted verification package submitted by the applicant? This would include the W-9, all identification provided, the full banking details for the entity, and the original wet ink signature pages if available. I signed it with my full professional title. I hit send. I was not a panicked sister anymore. I was a law firm. The response came in less than an hour. Lawyers get nervous when other law firms start citing federal compliance. The email was apologetic and immediate. Ms. Barnes, my deepest apologies. Please find the complete diligence file attached. We take these matters very seriously. I opened the attached zip file, and there it was, the W-9 form, the IRS form required for any entity receiving income, like the $90,000 TI allowance. It had my name, it had my forged signature, it had my social security number, and then it had the bank account details, account number and routing number for the payee. It was not my bank account. I ran the routing number. It was a small, online-only bank known for fast-tracking business accounts. The account holder, Mercer Creative Holdings, LLC, another shell company, registered just one day after Mercer Collective. Tessa was not just going to default. She was going to have the landlord send $90,000 of their money, secured by my name, directly into a private bank account she controlled, and then vanish. I closed the file. I had everything: the forgery, the deceased notary, the IP address, the money trail, the implicated family member, and now, the final, irrefutable proof of intent, the fraudulent bank account. I looked at the clock. The TI allowance would not be funded for at least another few days. Not until the lease was fully countersigned and the insurance certificates were in place. I had time. Tessa thought she was throwing a grand opening. She was right, but it was not going to be her gallery. It was going to be the grand opening of her indictment. I needed one more thing. I needed her to place herself at the scene of the crime, publicly and voluntarily. I needed her to boast. I knew Tessa. The minute that lease was fully executed, she would be on social media, champagne flute in hand, tagging the Archer on Larkspur, thanking her team for making her dream a reality. I set up a Google alert for Tessa Mercer and Mercer Collective. I would let her send the invitation herself. I would let her build the stage, fill the room with witnesses, and pop the cork. I would not just stop this. I would wait until she was at the absolute peak of her triumph. And then I would enforce the terms. My sister, Tessa, is 36 years old. To our family, she is the eternal prodigy, the visionary, who is always just one big break away from massive success. To me, she is an event of managed chaos, a woman who needs to be seen, who thrives on the reflection of admiration in other people's eyes. She is all flash, all curated surfaces. Tessa believes that success is not something you build. It is something you perform, and a performance requires a stage, props, and an audience. She learned early on that if you are charming enough, you never have to pay for any of them yourself. She does not just spend money, she incinerates it, needing the light and heat to feel real. Our family was her first, and most loyal, audience. The roles were set before I was old enough to read. Tessa was the star, the risk-taker, the bright, unpredictable comet. I was the rock, the safe one, the quiet one. My achievements, scholarships, law review. Making associate at Hawksley Blake were not celebrated. They were expected. They were practical, like utilities. My success was the safety net, the sturdy, boring infrastructure that allowed Tessa to fly as recklessly as she pleased. No one throws a party for the plumbing, but everyone panics when the water gets shut off. I was the plumbing. This dynamic defined us. It is the only reason she could have possibly thought this was a good idea. She did not see me as a person with a life I had built. She saw me as a resource she had not yet tapped. This was not the first time she had blurred the lines, only the most egregious. The precedent was set years ago. When I was in my second year of law school, I was drowning in prep for my corporation's final. She called me, her voice a whirlwind of manufactured panic. "Lila, honey, you have to help me. I am launching the new boutique, and the bank just needs this tiny little paper signed. It is just an acknowledgement. Something about my husband's assets. He is traveling. I cannot reach him, and the deadline is today. It means nothing. It is just a formality. Can you just sign his name? Just this once, for me?" I remember the chill that went through me. "Tess, I cannot do that. That is forgery. That is a crime." And then came the laugh. The airy, patronizing laugh that meant I was being silly, that I was being so Lila. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. Lila, it is just a piece of paper. It is not real. It is just to get the loan moving. You are a lawyer. You know it is all just paperwork. Are you going to let a silly little signature stop my dream?" I refused. I explained, in detail, the legal exposure, the fact that it would invalidate the entire loan agreement, that she could be prosecuted. She did not hear any of it. She grew cold. She accused me of being jealous, of never supporting her. She hung up and did not speak to me for a month. Later, I found out she had convinced our mother to co-sign the loan, telling her it was just in case. The boutique failed 6 months later, leaving our mother with $30,000 in debt that I quietly paid off. Tessa never mentioned it. The family narrative was that I had helped out. Tessa never learned the lesson. She only learned that consequences were negotiable, and that no was just the beginning of a negotiation. 2 hours after she hung up on me, the call where I mentioned the personal guarantee, my phone rang again. It was my mother. "Lila, dear." Her voice was tight, stretched thin over a carefully constructed calm. "I just spoke to your sister. She is absolutely beside herself. She said you two had a terrible misunderstanding." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice perfectly flat. "Tessa used my social security number and forged my signature on a $750,000 lease guarantee. What part of that is a misunderstanding?" A long sigh. It was the sound of my childhood, the sound of exasperation directed at the wrong child. "Lila, please, do not make a big deal out of this." There it was, the family motto. The words used to sweep every broken dish, every missed car payment, every shattered promise under the rug. Do not make a big deal. It was code for, let Tessa have what she wants. Your feelings are the inconvenience. "She is under so much pressure," my mother continued, her voice pleading. "This gallery is her entire life. You know how she is. She gets ahead of herself. She probably just put your name down as a reference and it got mixed up. You are a lawyer. You can make a call and fix this quietly. It is a family matter." It stopped being a family matter when she filed a fraudulent document with a deceased notary's seal. I said. The ice in my voice was so cold, it hurt my own ears. "This is a felony." "Do not use that word," she snapped. "Think of what you are doing. You would ruin your sister, ruin this family over some paperwork." "She is the one who did this," I said. "I am just the one who found it." I ended the call. The family was not a refuge. It was the broken system that had enabled this. I was on my own, which, as a lawyer, is exactly where I prefer to be. I needed facts. I needed to know what Tessa was running from. I knew her last gallery had collapsed 4 years prior. The official story was a soft market. I suspected the truth was harder. I called an old friend from college, Anna, who works as a senior claims adjuster for a major commercial insurer. We met for coffee the next morning. Tessa Mercer, Anna said, stirring her drink. She would not meet my eyes. Lila, I am so sorry. We all knew she was your sister. What happened? Anna. The real story. I am not her sister right now. I am her attorney. Or, I thought, the opposing counsel. Anna took a deep breath. It was a total nightmare. She took out a policy for a private viewing gallery, low foot traffic, high-value art, standard stuff. Then, for her launch, she threw a party for 200 people with a full bar and a live band. A waiter slipped on a wet spot, crashed into a 6-figure sculpture. The artist sued Tessa. The caterer sued Tessa. The building owner sued Tessa. And the insurance claim? Denied, Anna said flatly. Material misrepresentation of use. She had insured a library and was operating a nightclub. The fraud exclusion in her policy voided the whole thing. Last I heard, she had $500,000 in judgments against her and was completely uninsurable. No one in the industry will touch her. She owes everyone money. The vague event/showcase clause in the new lease suddenly made perfect, terrifying sense. She was doing it again, but this time, the liability shield was not a worthless insurance policy, it was me. I went back to my office and pulled the public records for her husband, for every variation of her name. I found the stacked LLCs, Mercer Collective, filed 3 weeks ago, Mercer Creative Holdings, filed 2 weeks ago, Larkspur Ventures, filed last year. It was a shell game, designed to move money and isolate debt. The penthouse showroom was not a business. It was a stage set for a much larger con. I pieced it together. Step 1. Use my pristine identity to secure the lease. Step 2. Get the $90,000 in tenant improvement allowance wired from the landlord to her new, clean Mercer Creative Holdings account. Step 3. Use the prestigious Archer on Larkspur address and the grand opening photos to lure in short-term investors, convincing them to fund her vision. Step 4. Once she had their money, she would assign the lease to one of her other empty LLCs using the broad assignment clause she had negotiated, default on the rent, and vanish with the $90,000 and the investor cash. The landlord would be left with an empty penthouse and a worthless tenant. The investors would have nothing, and I would be left holding a confession of judgment for nearly $1 million. I spent the rest of the night gathering the proof, moving from sister to prosecutor. I opened Tessa's Instagram. It was, as always, meticulously curated and perfectly public. 3 weeks ago, a photo of her holding a single key, beaming, with the city skyline visible through a floor-to-ceiling window behind her. The geotag, the Archer on Larkspur. The caption, got the keys to my kingdom. The vision is coming to life. Penthouse Gallery Boss. I checked the metadata on the lease file. The PDF had been created and signed on that exact date. She got the keys for a walkthrough and committed wire fraud from her laptop in the same hour. 2 weeks ago, the photo from our family dinner. Celebrating the next chapter with my amazing family, they believe in me so much. 1 week ago, a photo of her and her friends, holding champagne flutes. The deal is done. Landlord signed. Mercer Gallery is official. Get ready. I matched the date of that post to the email I had found from the landlord's representative, confirming the lease was fully executed and countersigned. The timeline was perfect. The hard inquiry on my credit, the forgery, the email to the landlord, the public boasts on social media. Every post she made celebrating her win was another exhibit for my file. She was not just desperate, she was proud of herself. She genuinely believed she had pulled it off, that she had outsmarted me, the landlord, and the entire system. She believed she was the star, and I was just the footnote, the fine print. I closed the file, the stack of evidence now thick. I took a sticky note and wrote one line on the cover of the folder. Arrogance is the evidence. I had the evidence. Now I needed to build the cage. A quiet review of the executed lease showed the tenant improvement allowance. The $90,000 was scheduled for disbursement upon the landlord's final sign-off of the insurance certificate, which was due in 3 days, 72 hours, That was the countdown. Once that money moved, my leverage would plummet, and the situation would become exponentially more complicated. My goal was not just to prove the fraud, but to reverse the transaction entirely, leaving Tessa holding nothing but her own liability. My first moves were purely defensive. I spent an hour on the phone, my voice a monotone of forced calm, navigating the automated systems of the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. I placed an extended fraud alert and a full credit freeze on my file. This would lock down my social security number. No one could even attempt to apply for a credit card, let alone a commercial lease, in my name without speaking to me directly. My financial identity was now a fortress. Next, the police report. I did not go to my local precinct. I drove downtown, to the jurisdiction where the building was located. I filed a report for felony identity theft and forgery. The desk sergeant who took the report was unimpressed, shuffling papers with a sigh. This was just another file in his overflowing cabinet, but I was not there to start an investigation. I was there for the report number. That number was the key. It was the official, bureaucratic stamp that transformed my claim from a personal accusation into a legal fact recognized by the state. Back at my office, I drafted the first formal notice to North Point Properties and the building management. I sent it from my personal email, certified mail, return receipt requested, and also as a PDF to their legal counsel. It was a formal notice of identity theft under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. I attached the police report number. I stated, in the clearest possible terms, that the lease agreement, the personal guarantee, and all associated documents bearing my name were fraudulent and therefore void. I demanded they immediately cease all transactions associated with the lease and my credit file, specifically citing the pending $90,000 TI allowance disbursement. This put them on legal notice. If they disbursed that money now, it was no longer a mistake. It was willful negligence. My next email was to the landlord's counsel, the one who had been so cooperative earlier. My tone shifted from internal compliance to active dispute. I demanded 2 things. First, the complete K-1 tax package for Mercer Collective LLC. I cited my status as a purported guarantor who needed to assess the tenant's financial viability before any further steps. I knew they would not have one, or if they did, it would be as fraudulent as the lease. Second, I demanded immediate access to the original, wet ink signature pages for forensic examination. I knew they did not have them. This was a digital transaction built on a forgery of a dead notary, but the demand itself introduces the threat of forensic science. It implies that the document will be scrutinized for ink, pressure, and paper. It is a threat that lawyers understand. I followed this up with a call. I found the name of the best forensic document examiner in the state. I put him on retainer. I did not have the originals yet, but I wanted him ready. I wanted the invoice for his retainer on file. The landlord's counsel was now panicking. He called me, his voice strained. "Ms. Barnes, this is a very serious allegation. We have an executed lease. My client is exposed here. We are all exposed," I said, my voice cold. "Your client was negligent in their verification. The notary you accepted is deceased. The W-9 submitted for the tenant is fraudulent. Your client is currently facilitating a felony. What do you want?" he asked. The question of a man looking for the fastest way out. This was the opening. "I want to resolve this cleanly," I said. "We both know this lease is unenforceable, but if we fight, we all lose. The tenant," I used the word carefully, "is proceeding as if she is opening a gallery. She is planning a soft opening. She is clearly unstable. She is demanding the TI allowance," he said, confirming my fears. "She is threatening to sue us for delays." "Perfect," I said. "Let's use that. Propose a meeting, a final due diligence walkthrough. You, me, and her. Tell her it is to expedite the estoppel certificate for your lender. Tell her you just need to sign off on a final punch list before you can release the $90,000. "I do not understand. You want to expedite it?" "No," I said. "I want her in a room where she believes she is one signature away from her money. I am drafting a side letter, a simple addendum. I spent the next hour drafting the most beautiful trap I have ever written. It was a single page, titled Addendum to Lease and Guarantee. It looked boring. It was mostly technical jargon about the build-out and the final acceptance of the premises. But buried in paragraph 3, I inserted the payload. In consideration of the immediate release of the TI allowance, all parties landlord, tenant, and guarantor hereby represent and warrant that all information provided during diligence is true and correct. If any material information, including but not limited to the identity or financial standing of any party or guarantor, is found to be fraudulent, this lease and all associated guarantees shall be rendered null and void ab initio, and tenant agrees to the immediate return of all funds, including the deposit, within 24 hours. It was a mutual rescission if fraud clause. It was a truth serum disguised as a bank withdrawal slip. If Tessa signed it, and to get her $90,000, she would sign anything, she would be personally invalidating her own lease. She would be signing her own confession and agreeing to return the deposit. I sent the draft to the landlord's counsel. Propose this. Tell her it is a final formality from your bank. She will sign it. My defensive moves were in place. The civil trap was set. Now, I needed the criminal leverage. I took my file, the lease, the deceased notary's record, the fraudulent W-9, the metadata, the police report, and I went to the Kingsbury County District Attorney's office. I did not go to the general intake. I used my bar credentials to get a 15-minute meeting with an assistant district attorney in the Economic Crimes Division. I laid it out in 10 minutes. This is not a civil dispute, I finished. This is a 5-year, $750,000 wire fraud scheme with an active attempt to extract $90,000 in the next 72 hours. I am not here to ask you to press charges today. I am here to put this on your desk. I have a plan to stop the civil damage, but I need a direct line to you if this escalates. This is organized, premeditated, and it involves multiple shell companies and a deceased notary. The ADA listened, his expression hardening as I walked him through the evidence. He took the file. You have a solid case, Ms. Barnes. This is clean. You do what you need to do on the civil side. Call my direct number if she makes one more move. We will be ready. I left with his business card. The safety was off. That evening, Tessa's soft opening invitation arrived via email. A slick, digital card with gold lettering. Mercer Gallery, The Unveiling. It was in 2 days. The day before the TI allowance was supposedly due. The timing was perfect. I called my parents. I received Tessa's invitation, I said, my voice neutral. Oh, wonderful, my mother gushed, audibly relieved I was not bringing up our last call. We are all going. It is going to be spectacular. You must come, Lila. It is time to let this all go and support your sister. I will be there, I said. But I need you and Dad to understand something. This is a legal matter now. I will be attending with an associate from my firm. And Mom, I will be recording the audio of my conversations. The line went silent. Lila, you cannot be serious. That is monstrous. It is legal, I said. This is a one-party consent state. I am informing you as a courtesy. I am the victim of a felony, and I will not be in a room with the person who committed it, or anyone defending her, without a record. If you do not like it, do not say anything you would not want a judge to hear. I hung up on her shocked silence. I then sat down and prepared my script. I would not accuse. I would not yell. I would ask questions. Simple, open-ended questions, designed to elicit admissions. Tess, this place looks incredible. How did you even get the landlord to approve this without a guarantor? That TI money must be a lifesaver. Where is that check going? I am just so impressed you handled all this paperwork. That personal guarantee must have been complicated. I needed more than just a recording. I needed a witness who understood the stakes. I went to Mark, a senior associate in my firm's banking and finance division. Mark and I had come up together. I trusted him implicitly, and he owed me for covering for him on the Braxton deal last year. Mark, I said, closing his office door. I need you to come to a party with me, and I need you to play a role. I explained the SNDA, the estoppel, the lender. You are not my colleague, I said. You are a representative from the landlord's lender. You are nervous. You are here to review the tenant before your bank funds the next phase of the building's refinance. You need to ask Tessa, directly, about the good guy guarantee. You need to ask her, directly, about the assignment clause. I need to see her lie to a supposed bank representative. Mark's eyes lit up. Lawyers rarely get to do field work. This is insane, Lila. I am in. When is it? In 2 days, I said. Wear your most expensive-looking, most boring suit. One last detail. Tessa was arrogant, but she was also slippery. She always carried a designer briefcase to these events, stuffed with paperwork she would pretend to review. I needed to know where that bag went. I bought a simple tile tracker, the kind you put on your keys. It was small, black, and adhesive. At the party, in the chaos of the congratulations, I would find a moment. I would slip it into the lining of her bag. If she tried to leave, if she tried to meet someone, I would know. The clock was ticking. 72 hours. The landlord was primed. The DA was on alert. My colleague was prepped. The side letter. My beautiful, venomous trap was sitting on the landlord's desk, waiting for Tessa to walk into the penthouse and sign her name. The stage was set. She had sent the invitations. I was just bringing the script. The Archer on Larkspur was not just a building. It was an event. The penthouse gleamed, a glass box suspended in the night sky, its ceiling soaring 20 feet high, its walls nothing but sheer, uninterrupted views of the city lights. A DJ spun ambient electronic music from a corner, just loud enough to create a pulse. White-jacketed waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and wine, and the crowd was dense. Tessa's friends, her circle, all dressed in expensive, artfully casual outfits, laughing too loudly, holding their glasses just so. It was a performance, and every single person was on stage. I arrived with Mark at 7:30. He looked perfect, a charcoal gray suit that screamed finance, a blandly expensive tie, and an expression of polite boredom. My parents were already there, standing awkwardly near the entrance, clearly out of their element. My mother spotted me and her face tightened, a silent, pleading look that begged me not to make a scene. I ignored her and walked past, my hand brushing the small, digital audio recorder in my coat pocket. It was already on. Tessa was holding court by the massive terrace doors, wearing a metallic silver dress that caught the light, a glass of champagne in her hand. She was radiant, energized by the adoration, by the sheer, expensive reality of the room. She saw me and her smile widened, a brilliant, conquering smile. Lila, you made it. She rushed over and pulled me into an aggressive, one-armed hug, her voice projecting for everyone to hear. Everyone, this is my baby sister, Lila, the brilliant one. I am so glad she could be here to celebrate with me. I smiled, a tight, controlled expression I had perfected over decades. I would not miss it. Tess, congratulations. It is a lot. I let her drag me into a small circle of her friends. Lila is the brains of the family, she announced, patting my arm. The serious lawyer. Oh, really? What kind of law? One of her friends asked, her eyes grazing over my simple black dress with disinterest. Real estate, I said, my voice quiet but clear. Commercial, mostly high-end leases, like this one. Tessa's grip on my arm tightened, just for a fraction of a second. She shot me a look, a quick flash of warning, before plastering her smile back on. Sea brains, she laughed, and quickly steered the conversation away, but the seed was planted. I excused myself and moved toward the coat check. I spotted her bag, the designer briefcase she always carried, sitting on a shelf behind the counter, slightly apart from the others. The attendant was busy with a new arrival. It took me less than 10 seconds. I palmed the small tile tracker. walked past the counter as if looking for the restroom, and, in a single, fluid motion, dropped it into the bag's unzipped side pocket. I was back in the main room before the attendant even looked up. I found Mark and nodded. Yeah. He was already scanning the room. I pointed out the landlord's representative, a harried-looking man named Henderson, who was clutching a thin file folder and looking at his watch. Henderson made his way to Tessa. "Tessa, fantastic party. Really," he said, his voice strained. "Listen, I am just so glad this paperwork is finally done. My counsel was giving me a migraine. The exhibits, the writers, that confession of judgment clause alone was a nightmare." He was complaining, but he had also just confirmed the existence of the lease's most toxic clause to a room full of people. Mark, on cue, drifted over, inserting himself into the conversation. "Excuse me, Ms. Mercer, I am Mark Harrison, from the lender's office. We are handling the building's refinance." Tessa immediately turned on her full charm. "Mr. Harrison, a pleasure. I am so glad you could see the space in person." "Very impressive," Mark said, his tone flat. "I was just reviewing the tenant file. We are, of course, very interested in the stability of the anchor leases. I had a question about the guarantee." "Oh, the guarantee?" "Yes." Tessa's smile did not waver. "The good guy guarantee on file is backed by a Lila Barnes," Mark said, consulting a blank notebook as if it held his notes. "Can you tell me about the guarantor's relationship to the tenant entity?" Tessa laughed, a light, airy sound. "Oh, that is just family. My sister. Actually, she is right over there. We are a very close family. She is fully supportive of the venture. It is all family support." I chose that moment to walk over, holding 2 fresh glasses of wine. "Mark, Tessa, are we talking about the lease?" "Lila." Tessa beamed, taking the glass. "This is Mr. Harrison, from the landlord's bank. He was just asking about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, smiling at Mark. "He was just admiring our family arrangement," Tessa said. I turned to Tessa, my expression one of sisterly teasing. "Well, I am just glad it all worked out. I was so worried when you said you were handling the paperwork. I mean, did you just sign for me? You know how I hate forms." She winked at me, a playful conspiratorial wink for the benefit of the banker. "We are a big family," she said, tapping the side of her nose. "We take care of each other. It is all handled." I felt the recorder in my pocket, a solid, heavy weight. That was admission number 1. Corroborated by a witness. Nearby, one of Tessa's friends was filming the interaction for her Instagram story, panning from Tessa's winking face to the glittering skyline. "Big night," the friend narrated. Tessa signing the last piece of the estoppel-making moves that Thai money is about to hit. The camera caught Tessa raising her glass in a toast. Public admission. I let the smile drop from my face, just a fraction. I leaned in, lowering my voice so only Tessa could hear. "Speaking of, Tess, I need to ask you, just for my own records. You did use my social security number for the application, right?" Tessa's face clouded. The party noise seemed to fade. "Lila, do not be like this," she hissed, her smile turning brittle. "Yes or no?" "Tessa." She fayed her hand, a gesture of supreme dismissal. "It is a small thing, a formality. It is done. Look at this place. We won." I pressed. My voice was a whisper, but it was as sharp as a scalpel. "And you know you did not have my written consent to do that, or to sign the guarantee." "You are being so difficult," she snapped, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was listening. "Why are you trying to ruin this? It is my night. You are just jealous. You have always been jealous." Tessa, Henderson, the landlord's rep, reappeared, cutting through the tension. He was holding his file folder and a pen. "I am so sorry to interrupt, but I have to run. You know, I just need your signature on this one last side letter. It is just a formality, an addendum for my lender." confirming all the diligence is correct. Once you sign this, I can authorize the finance department to release the TI funds tomorrow morning. This was it. The $90,000, the prize. Tessa's entire demeanor changed. The anger vanished, replaced by triumphant, greedy relief. Oh, absolutely. Henderson, anything you need. She took the file from him. She did not even glance at the text. She grabbed his pen and, resting the paper on the folder, scrawled her name, Tessa Mercer, at the bottom of the page, right above the signature line for Tenant Mercer Collective LLC, the page I had drafted, the mutual rescission if fraud clause. She signed her own confession. Henderson took the paper back, relieved. Excellent, thank you. Have a wonderful party. He nodded at me and Mark and disappeared into the crowd. Tessa turned back to me, her face flushed with victory. See done, all handled. Now, if you will excuse me, I have investors to talk to. I did not move. I just watched her. I had it all. The audio recording of her admissions, the social media video, the witness testimony from Mark, and now, the signed document, a legally binding agreement to rescind the entire lease based on the very fraud she had just admitted to. She started to turn away. Tessa, I said. She stopped, annoyed. What now? Lila. I let the mask drop. The proud sister, the teasing sister, the difficult sister, it all fell away, leaving the attorney. My voice was calm, flat, and final. Tomorrow, I said, my eyes holding hers. You are going to need a criminal lawyer. I did not wait for her reply. I turned and walked toward the elevator, Mark following a half step behind. The DJ put on a new track, the bass thumping against my chest. I did not look back. I had the file. I had the evidence. The party was over. I was at my desk by 6 a.m. The adrenaline from the night, a cold, clean burn, had replaced any need for sleep. The party was the performance. This was the execution. I had the audio file from my recorder, the video from Tessa's friend's social media, and the high-resolution photo I had taken of the signed side letter before leaving. The evidence was compiled, categorized, and ready to deploy. My first email, sent at 6:01 a.m., went to Henderson at North Point Properties, his in-house counsel, the senior VP of the lending bank Mark had identified, and the commercial underwriter for the building's insurance policy. It was a digital declaration of war, formatted as a final notice. Attached to this email was the full package. First, my formal, notarized affidavit of identity theft, detailing the entire timeline of the fraud. Second, the official police report, case number K-2025-049. Third, the preliminary letter from the forensic document examiner I had retained, stating that based on the digital evidence, the notary seal was demonstrably fraudulent and the signature inconsistent with known exemplars. And fourth, the crown jewel, a scanned copy of the addendum to lease and guarantee that Tessa had so eagerly signed less than 12 hours before. In the body of the email, I did not plead, I dictated. To all parties, I wrote, please be advised that the lease agreement for the penthouse suite at the Archer on Larkspur is null and void, as established by the attached affidavit and police report. The lease was procured through criminal fraud, forgery, and identity theft. Furthermore, please see the attached, fully executed side letter from last night. Per the terms of this addendum, which tenant Tessa Mercer signed in the presence of witnesses, the discovery of this material fraud triggers an immediate and mutual rescission of the lease ab initio as if it never existed. This letter serves as a formal demand for the immediate return of the $30,000 deposit, not from the landlord, but from the personal accounts of the perpetrator, Tessa Mercer, as specified in the addendum she herself executed. I sent a second, separate notice to the lender. In light of the established fraud, any estoppel certificate signed by any party in connection with this lease is void under the fraud exception. Your bank is hereby on notice that it cannot and must not rely on any representations made regarding this tenancy. Any attempt to enforce the SNDA agreement against the victim, Lila Barnes, will be met with a lawsuit for damages. My third email was a short, sharp directive to Henderson and his counsel. This is a formal demand to immediately halt the disbursement of the $90,000 tenant improvement allowance, given that you are now in receipt of irrefutable evidence of criminal fraud. Any release of these funds will be viewed as an act of bad faith and a willful conspiracy to defraud. You will be held jointly and severally liable for all rescission damages. I was not just severing my connection to the lease. I was turning the landlord into a co-conspirator if he took one more step toward funding Tessa's fantasy. My next move was to protect my assets. I electronically filed a UCC filing objection with the Secretary of State. I cited the fraudulent debtor name and the police report number. This would serve as a public, permanent block, preventing any creditor from ever acting on the draft lien Tessa's team had prepared. My property was firewalled. Finally, I called Anna, my contact in the insurance world, and also sent a formal notice to the building's insurer. I am the victim of the identity theft used to secure the certificate of insurance for Mercer Collective LLC. Furthermore, the tenant's application contains material misrepresentation as to the intended use of the premises, a fact that has already resulted in denied claims for this same tenant in the past. I demand you immediately revoke the COI on the basis of fraud in the application. Without insurance, no landlord can legally allow a tenant to operate. Without insurance, the lease is in default. I sat back and watched the sun rise. The first tremor came at 8:15 a.m. An email from the Lenders Council to North Point, copying me. We are immediately halting all activity related to the Archer refinance pending a full investigation into this matter. All representations from Mercer Collective are to be considered unreliable. The bank was out. At 8:45 a.m., an email from Henderson, the landlord. Ms. Barnes, we are in receipt of your correspondence. We are halting the TI disbursement and treating this as a serious legal matter. At 9 a.m., the first call from Tessa hit my phone. I watched her name flash on the screen. I silenced it. It rang again. I silenced it. And again, I let it go to voicemail. A text message popped up. Lila, call me. What did you do? Another. The key fob for the penthouse is not working. They stopped the contractors. You did this. Call me now. My phone began to ring again. Relentlessly. I turned it off and placed it in my desk drawer. I was a lawyer, and I was now in an active dispute. All communication would be in writing. A new email flooded my inbox, this time from Tessa's personal account. It was a long, rambling, hysterical tirade. It was all caps. It accused me of being a jealous, spiteful monster. It threatened to sue me for sabotaging her business. It demanded I call the landlord immediately and fix this. I took a sip of my coffee. I replied to the email. My response was one sentence. Tessa, all future communication must be directed to my attorney, or submitted in writing. I do not waive any of my rights or remedies. I was, of course, my own attorney. This maneuver was designed to create a formal legal barrier that she would inevitably, and emotionally, violate. 2 hours later, another email arrived. This one was from a lawyer I did not recognize. A name from a small, strip mall firm. Tessa had found counsel. The email was full of bluster, threatening injunctions, and tortious interference. It demanded I retract my statements to the landlord. I drafted my formal settlement proposal and sent it to her new lawyer, copying Tessa. Counsel, I began. My client, Lila Barnes, is the victim of a multi-part felony. Your client is the perpetrator. The evidence is conclusive. However, in the interest of resolving this without involving the district attorney at this immediate juncture, Ms. Barnes presents the following non-negotiable settlement terms. 1. Your client, Tessa Mercer, will sign the attached stipulated judgment, admitting to the acts of forgery and identity theft. Your client will immediately and personally repay the $30,000 deposit to the landlord. 3. Your client will sign a full mutual release, terminating the lease and any and all claims. 4. Your client will pay for all legal and forensic fees incurred by Ms. Barnes, a total of $25,000. If this agreement is not executed within 24 hours, the complete evidence file will be hand-delivered to the Kingsbury County District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. I attached a draft of the stipulated judgment, a full, detailed confession, written in the driest, most damning legal language. The response from Tessa's personal email came just minutes later. Apparently having bypassed her new lawyer, she was arrogant to the last. "You think you can threaten me? I have investors. They will back me. They will crush you. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. You jealous little bitch." I smiled. Investors. She had just admitted to having co-conspirators. I forwarded her email to her own lawyer with a simple note. "Please advise your client to cease all direct contact and to refrain from making further written admissions." Her email is now Exhibit D. Please note my settlement offer is contingent on her investors being added as joint defendants to the stipulated judgment. My next step was to lock down the evidence. I drafted a formal litigation hold letter. I sent it to Tessa, her new lawyer, the landlord, the lender, my parents, and every person I had seen at that party. It legally required them to preserve all documents, emails, text messages, social media posts, and any other data related to the Mercer Gallery. It informed them that destruction of this data would be considered spoliation of evidence, and I would seek sanctions. I was not just controlling the narrative, I was controlling the record. My final call of the morning was to the ADA for Kingsbury County. "Ms. Barnes," he said, his voice all business. "Good morning," I said. "I have an update. The target has been contained. The civil transaction is frozen, and I have acquired new evidence. I have a full audio admission of the crime, and I have a subsequent signed document by the perpetrator agreeing to rescind the contract if fraud was found. The case is complete. I would like to schedule a time to deliver the file." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ms. Barnes," the ADA said, a new note of respect in his voice. "You have been busy. How does tomorrow at 10 a.m. sound?" I hung up. I looked at the file on my desk. I had reversed the liability. I had protected my assets. I had stopped the theft. And I had just turned my sister and her mysterious investors into the primary targets of a criminal investigation. The system was working. Tessa's boast about her investor was not just arrogance, it was an admission. I had been focused on my sister, the face of the fraud. But Tessa lacked the sophistication to draft a 60-page commercial lease loaded with predatory clauses. She was the performer, not the playwright. I had assumed she had hired a cut-rate lawyer. The truth was far more dangerous. The response to my settlement offer did not come from Tessa's terrified-looking lawyer. It came from a new firm, a sleek, downtown high-rise name, Kincaid Strauss. The email was polite, glacial, and copied to North Point Properties. It was from a senior partner, and it did not represent Tessa. It represented Mr. Gideon Vale. "Dear Ms. Barnes," it read, "we represent the primary investor in Mercer Collective LLC. Mr. Gideon Vale, we are aware of your allegations, which we view as a transparent attempt to disrupt a valid commercial transaction. My client's funding is contingent on the project proceeding. Your interference is causing significant damages. We hereby demand you cease and desist all contact with North Point Properties. Furthermore, we demand North Point immediately release the $90,000 TI allowance to Mercer Collective, per the executed lease, or we will file for injunctive relief and sue for breach of contract by close of business tomorrow." Gideon Vale, the investor, was real, and he was attacking. He was trying to muscle past me, paint me as a hysterical family member, and strong-arm the landlord into releasing the cash. I did a deep dive. Gideon Vale was not a venture capitalist. He was a hard money broker. He specialized in high-interest, short-term bridge loans, often taking positions in the shell companies he funded. He was, in short, a shark, one who smelled $90,000 of the landlord's money, secured by my credit. He had made a critical error. He had engaged. I did not reply to his expensive lawyer. I replied directly to Gideon Vale, copying his counsel and North Point's. The subject line was Criminal Forgery and Conspiracy to Defraud. Archer Lease. Mr. Vale, I wrote, your attempt to enforce this lease confirms your role as a co-conspirator in the felonies committed. You are hereby on notice that the lease guarantee you are attempting to enforce was secured using a fraudulent notary seal. The notary public listed. Thomas P. Fincher. Died on May 17, 2023. We have the death certificate. This is not a family dispute. It is a criminal act. Your client, Tessa Mercer, has already admitted to the forgery, your demand for the $90,000. Knowing the lease was procured by fraud makes you an active participant. Any legal action you take will be met with a countersuit naming you personally, and I will be forwarding this email to the Kingsbury County District Attorney as evidence of your continued criminal intent. Govern yourself accordingly. The silence that followed was absolute. The aggressive demands from Kincaid Strauss stopped. The 5 p.m. deadline passed. Gideon Vale, the shark, was suddenly very still in the water. He knew about the fraud. Clearly, he had enabled it, but he had not known about the deceased notary. He had not known I was a competent attorney. He was silent for 4 hours. Then, at 9 p.m., a new email, a different tactic. This one was conciliatory. Ms. Barnes, his lawyer wrote, clearly, there has been a misunderstanding. My client was not aware of the methods Ms. Mercer used. He simply wants to see the gallery open, to resolve this amicably. Mr. Vale proposes we substitute the guarantor. We have drafted an assignment and assumption of lease, transferring all of Mercer Collective's interests to a new, fully capitalized entity, Larkspur Holdings. This will remove you from the lease entirely. It is the clean break we all want. It was a good move, a standard move. He was trying to save the deal, keep the $90,000 allowance in play, and cut Tessa loose, leaving her as the lone perpetrator. He would keep the penthouse, funded by the landlord, and I would be gone. But he was still underestimating me. I had read the contract. I hit reply all. Counsel, I am surprised you would draft an assignment without first reading the lease. Please see Section 14.2, the anti-assignment clause, which prohibits any transfer of interest without prior written consent from the landlord. Given the circumstances, consent is not granted. But more importantly, as a matter of black-letter law, fraud voids the contract ab initio. A contract procured by criminal forgery does not exist. It is a legal nullity. You cannot assign a nullity. There is nothing to transfer. The lease is dead. This is my final communication on the civil matter. Now I knew who he was. I had to know how deep his involvement went. I went back to the original file package, the one the landlord's counsel had sent me from their diligence portal. It contained not just the final PDF, but the original Word document drafts. I opened the metadata on the core lease document. The author was the landlord's counsel, but the confession of judgment clause, the single most predatory, dangerous clause in the entire lease, was not in the original draft. It had been added as a rider 2 days later. I checked the metadata on that rider file. Author G. Vale, Company Vale Capital. My blood turned to ice. Tessa had not found that clause online. She had not even known what it was. Gideon Vale had written it. He had taken my stolen Social Security number, my name, my identity, and he had personally drafted the legal weapon designed to seize my assets and bypass the entire court system. He was not just an investor. He was the architect of the entire fraud. I picked up my phone and called the assistant district attorney. I have him, I said. The architect, Gideon Vale, of Vale Capital. He is a hard money broker. The metadata from the source file proves he personally drafted the confession of judgment rider using my stolen identity. Tessa was the hand. He was the brain. The ADA was quiet for a moment. Thank you. Ms. Barnes, that completes the picture. We will be in touch. 2 days later, the system moved. 2 official target letters were dispatched by courier from the DA's office. one to Tessa Mercer's apartment, the other to Gideon Vale's office at Kincaid Strauss. They were formally advised that they were the targets of a grand jury investigation for felony forgery, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The effect was instantaneous. My phone lit up. This time, it was North Point's counsel, the landlord. His voice was no longer strained. It was terrified. "Lila, Ms. Barnes, we just received a subpoena from the district attorney for the entire Mercer file. We are cooperating fully, 100%. We want to be perfectly clear, North Point Properties views you as the victim in this. We were also defrauded. We will offer a full, immediate rescission of the lease and the return of the $30,000 deposit. We are prepared to offer testimony against both Ms. Mercer and Mr. Vale. Whatever you need, you have it. We are on your side." I had my rescission. The civil case was over. The landlord had flipped. That night, my doorbell rang. It was not a courier. It was my parents. They stood on my doorstep, looking small and gray. My mother's eyes were red. My father stared at his shoes. "Lila," my mother began, her voice cracking. "We just came from Tessa's. There was a letter, a target letter. They are talking about prison." I waited. I did not invite them in. "She is a mess," my mother whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "She made a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. But she is your sister, your family. You cannot let this happen. You cannot send her to prison." The old familiar dynamic, the old familiar words. "Do not make a big deal." "I am not sending her to prison," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of heat or emotion. It was the voice I used for depositions. "She did this. She committed multiple felonies. She forged my name, stole my identity, and conspired with a predator to saddle me with $1 million debt and seize my assets. I am not the one doing this. The law is—" "But you can stop it," my mother pleaded. "Just call them. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you forgive her." "It was not a misunderstanding," I said, "and I will not commit perjury to protect her. She needs a criminal lawyer, not me." I closed the door. The final phase began the next morning, a call from a new lawyer for Gideon Vale. This one a specialist in criminal defense. The arrogance was gone. The voice was smooth, pragmatic. "My client wants to make this right," he said. "He was deeply misled by Ms. Mercer. He is a respected businessman. This is a civil matter, and he wants to resolve it. He is prepared to return the $30,000 deposit to the landlord, and he will pay your client $50,000 for her trouble, a fee to compensate her for this unfortunate situation. A silence fee. He was offering me $50,000 to make the criminal charges go away." "Counsel," I said, "are you offering my client $50,000 in exchange for her refusal to cooperate with an active grand jury investigation? Because that sounds dangerously close to witness tampering. My client is not interested in a silence fee. We are not having this conversation." I hung up, and then, the final, pathetic explosion. An email from Tessa. She had obviously heard from Vale. She knew he was cutting her loose. She knew she was alone. The email was a torrent of narcissistic rage, sent at 2 a.m. "You did this," she wrote. "You were always jealous of me. You had to have everything, the perfect job, the perfect life, and you could not stand to see me have one thing. You could not stand to see me win. You set me up. You ruined me. You ruined Gideon. You destroyed our family. You are a cold, empty, jealous bitch. I hope you are happy. You have nothing left." I read it once, feeling nothing but the quiet finality of it all. I hit the forward button. I sent the entire email to the Assistant District Rat Attorney. My only added text, FYI, a spontaneous admission against interest for your file. This confirms her motive and her complete lack of remorse. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following week, a brutally fast turnaround for a civil matter. But the imminent $90,000 disbursement was a ticking clock that justified the speed. I did not walk into courtroom 3B as a victim. I walked in as my own counsel. My files organized, my suit perfectly pressed. The room was stuffy, the air thick with the smell of old wood varnish and anxiety. Tessa was there, sitting beside her new criminal lawyer, looking small and pale, her usual radiance completely extinguished. On the other side of the aisle sat Gideon Vale, next to his phalanx of expensive attorneys from Kincaid Strauss. He looked bored, as if this was an inconvenient interruption to his day. My parents sat alone in the back row of the gallery, faces etched with a stress I had never seen. The judge, Elias Thorne, a man with a reputation for zero tolerance for procedural games, called the case. In the matter of Barnes versus Mercer Collective LLC, North Point Properties, et al., this is a motion for a preliminary injunction and declaratory relief based on allegations of fraud. Gideon's lead attorney, a man whose suit probably cost more than my first car, stood up, his voice smooth as polished stone. Your Honor, what we have here is not a fraud, but a family dispute that has spiraled out of control. Ms. Mercer, in her enthusiasm to launch her business, perhaps overstepped, but the plaintiff, Miss Lila Barnes, was fully aware of the venture. She attended the soft opening. She has, in fact, benefited from the brand exposure this gallery has already generated. This is simply a case of guarantor's remorse, and we believe, Judge Thorne held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. He slowly turned his head to look at Gideon's lawyer. He did not speak. He just raised one silver eyebrow. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The lawyer, realizing he had massively misread the room, cleared his throat. That is, we believe this matter can be resolved by substituting the guarantor, as we have already proposed. Thank you, counsel. Let's hear from the plaintiff, the judge said, his voice dry. I stood and walked to the podium. I did not look at Tessa. I did not look at Gideon. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I began, my voice clear and caring in the quiet room. This is not a family dispute. This is a multi-step, premeditated criminal fraud, and I am not here to argue. I am here to present the record. The facts are not in dispute. I proceeded as if ticking off a checklist, each point a hammer blow. First, I have submitted my notarized affidavit of identity theft, along with the official police report, as Exhibit A. Second, the defendants claim to have a valid contract. I submit Exhibit B, the death certificate for Thomas P. Fincher, the notary public whose seal is on the lease guarantee. He died, Your Honor, 2 years before he supposedly notarized my signature. This is not a clerical error. It is a felony. Third, I submit Exhibit C, the metadata and IP address analysis for the digital signature file. It traces the creation of the forged document directly to an IP address registered to the home of the defendant, Tessa Mercer. Fourth, the defense claims I was aware and benefited. I submit Exhibit D, the fully executed side letter from the night of the soft opening, signed by Ms. Mercer herself. In this document, she personally agreed, in writing, that if any part of the diligence was found to be fraudulent, the entire lease would be rendered null and void ab initio, and she would be personally liable for the return of the deposit. I paused, letting that sink in. Gideon Vale was no longer looking bored. He was staring at Tessa with a look of pure, cold fury. She was shrinking in her chair. And finally, Your Honor, I continued, lest there be any doubt about intent or knowledge, I would like to play Exhibit E, a one-party consent audio recording from the same night. I nodded to the clerk. A speaker crackled to life. My recorded voice. I mean, did you just sign for me? You know how I hate forms. Tessa's recorded voice, light and laughing. We are a big family. We take care of each other. It is all handled. My voice. You did use my social security number for the application, right? Tessa's voice, dismissive. It is a small thing, a formality. It is done. My voice. And you know you did not have my written consent to do that. Tessa's voice, now sharp. You are being so difficult. It is my night." The audio clicked off. The courtroom was a vacuum. Tessa had her head in her hands. Gideon's lawyer was pale. Before the judge could even speak, the landlord's counsel shot to his feet. "Your Honor, North Point Properties was also a victim here. We were utterly duped by Ms. Mercer and her associates. We were induced into this lease by fraudulent documents. We fully support Ms. Barnes's motion for rescission. We have been defrauded." Judge Thorne looked down at the evidence, then at Gideon's table. "Counsel," he said to Gideon's lawyer, "your claim that your client was unaware of this seems thin, especially given that the metadata on the confession of judgment writer, which was attached to my copy of the evidence, originates from your client's server." Gideon Vale went rigid. The judge's voice was final. "The court finds that the plaintiff has overwhelmingly demonstrated a likelihood of success on the merits. The motion for a preliminary injunction is granted. All funds, including the $90,000 TI allowance, are hereby frozen. Any and all attempts to enforce the personal guarantee against Ms. Lila Barnes are void and enjoined, effective immediately." It was a total civil victory. But it was not over. As the judge said voided, a man in the back of the courtroom stood up. It was the assistant district attorney from Kingsbury County. "Your Honor, forgive the intrusion," the ADA said, walking forward to the bar. "Given the evidence presented in this civil matter, and in conjunction with our own investigation, the state has, as of this morning, filed a separate criminal complaint." Tessa let out a small, strangled cry. The ADA continued, his voice ringing with formal authority. "We have filed charges against both Tessa Mercer and Gideon Vale for forgery in the first degree, aggravated identity theft, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and offering a false instrument for filing." The room exploded in whispers. This was not about money anymore. This was about prison. Judge Thorne banged his gavel. "Order." He looked at the legal teams. His expression was grim. "This court's business is done, but I will give you all a piece of free advice." He stared at Gideon's and Tessa's lawyers. "Given the complementary nature of these legal actions, I strongly suggest you discuss a global consent judgment on the civil side. Your clients can settle this with Ms. Barnes now, or they can be utterly crushed by legal fees and discovery before the criminal trial even begins. Your choice." Gideon's lawyer, his expensive suit now looking rumpled, stood on shaky legs. "Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our client." "Recess granted," the judge said. Sweeping from the bench, Gideon Vale did not confer. He stormed out of the courtroom, his lawyer scrambling behind him. He was stalling, looking for a loophole, a way to cut Tessa loose and save himself. I did not wait. I stepped into the hallway, pulled out my phone, and sent 2 emails. The first was to my paralegal. "File the UCC termination demand with the Secretary of State immediately. Use the court order." The second was to the compliance departments of the banks I knew Vale used, FYI. "Attached is a court order and criminal complaint naming your client, Gideon Vale. Please flag all accounts for fraudulent activity." I was not just winning. I was salting the earth. I turned to go back into the courtroom to collect my briefcase. My parents were standing there, in the middle of the hallway. They were not looking at each other. They were looking at me. My mother's face was a mask of shock and, for the first time, a dawning, horrified respect. The wall of favoritism, the solid gold belief in Tessa's stardom and my utility, had not just cracked, it had been demolished. They silently moved from the aisle and sat in the row directly behind my plaintiff's table. They had, finally, chosen a side. Tessa found me as I was packing my files. Her criminal lawyer was trying to restrain her, but she tore her arm away. Her face was blotchy and red, her eyes wild. "Lila," she whispered, her voice raw. "A criminal complaint. They are talking about jail. You will really let me be convicted." She was looking for the old dynamic, for the emergency brake, for the quiet sister who would fix it. I stopped packing. I looked at her, not with anger, not with revenge, but with the cold, sterile light of the courtroom. "You are asking the wrong person," I said. "I did not do this. You did. You let yourself be convicted the moment you signed my name." The recess from the hearing was not a pause. It was the starting gun. Gideon and Tessa had left the courtroom as separate, panicked entities. I left with a court order and a plan. The civil injunction was the shield. Now I would assemble the sword. My first act was not against Tessa, but against Gideon's counsel. The metadata proved Gideon himself had drafted the confession of judgment, but his lawyers at Kincaid Strauss had transmitted it. They had allowed their client to use their firm as a weapon in a criminal conspiracy, leveraging their reputation to try and enforce a document they should have known was suspicious. I quietly compiled a detailed, multi-page bar complaint, citing their failure to perform due diligence and their role in attempting to enforce a contract based on a clear forgery. I did not file it. I sent a courtesy draft to the firm's senior managing partner, an old guard lawyer with a pristine reputation. It was a clear, unspoken threat: control your client, or I burn your firm's reputation to the waterline. The second front was the money. The landlord, North Point, was cooperating, but I wanted the path of the original $30,000 deposit ironed out. Their accounting department sent me the incoming wire details. The trace was disgustingly simple. Just as I'd suspected, it was a three-step waltz. First, an ACH transfer from my mother's personal checking account to Mercer Creative Holdings, the Shell LLC, with the memo, family loan. Second, a debit card transaction from Mercer Creative Holdings to a payment processor. Third, the processor's transfer to the landlord's escrow account. Tessa had used our mother to fund the fraud, routing it through a shell to make it look legitimate to the landlord. It was classic structuring, an attempt to launder the source of the funds. This was all the ammunition I needed. I filed a confidential tip with FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, detailing the suspicious cash flows between Tessa's stacked LLCs, Gideon Vale's capital firm, and the offshore accounts I suspected he used. I was no longer just a victim of identity theft. I was a whistleblower. While the regulatory bodies began to grind their slow gears, I moved to finalize my civil position. The landlord, North Point, was terrified. The ADA's appearance in court had shown them how close they were to being named as co-conspirators. Their counsel called me, desperate to make a deal. "We are victims, just like you, Lila," he pleaded. "Then prove it," I said. "I am sending you a release and cooperation agreement. It states that in exchange for my agreement not to pursue civil damages against North Point for negligence, you will provide me with a full, unredacted copy of every piece of correspondence, every email, every text message, every note between your team and either Tessa Mercer or Gideon Vale. You will give me everything." They signed it within the hour. The file they sent was a goldmine. The ADA's criminal complaint had been based on my evidence. This new file was the missing piece: the conspiracy. In their own words, the ADA, now armed with the court's injunction and the landlord's full cooperation, got his search warrant. He did not go to the penthouse. He went to Tessa's apartment. He seized her laptop, her hard drives, and her phone. What his forensics team found was devastating. My sister, in her infinite arrogance, had not just forged my signature once, she had practiced. Her hard drive contained a folder named Lila Admin. Inside were 24 high-resolution scans of my signature, taken from old birthday cards and documents I had left at our parents' house. There were Photoshop files showing her cutting and pasting it onto different backgrounds. There were practice templates. She had been building her forgery kit for months, but the real jackpot was the email chain between her and Gideon Vale. The chain that proved he was not just an investor, he was the mastermind. An email from Gideon to Tessa, dated 3 weeks before the lease signing: "The landlord is weak, but the guarantee is everything. We need the confession of judgment clause in the rider. It's the only way to get to the asset the sister fast. If she tries to fight, this clause allows us to seize her accounts before she can even file a motion. Get it done." Tessa's reply: "She will not fight. She is just a bookworm. Gideon, she will be terrified. She will just pay. Do not worry about her, Gideon. Worry about the execution. Make sure the notary looks real. Push the landlord to countersign before the 31st. We need to get the QOJ filed and the TI allowance dispersed before her sister even gets her credit alert. The ADA now had them. He had conspiracy, intent, and the means. The walls were closing in from every direction. Gideon Vale knew he was trapped. His criminal lawyer called me. The smooth, pragmatic voice was gone, replaced by an urgent, pleading tone. "Ms. Barnes," he said, "my client, Mr. Vale, he sees this has all gone too far. He is prepared to make a global settlement offer to make all of this, the civil and the criminal, go away. He is willing to settle this right now." "I am listening," I said. "Mr. Vale will sign a consent judgment. He will pay the $30,000 back to the landlord. He will pay your full legal fees, and he will pay an additional sum as a settlement." "No," I said. "No." "Here is my offer," I said. "This is not a negotiation. First, a consent judgment in my favor for $275,000, signed by both Gideon Vale and Tessa Mercer, jointly and severally. Second, Gideon Vale and Tessa Mercer will both issue a formal public apology to be published in the city's business journal, retracting all statements about their gallery. Third, they will pay every cent of my legal fees, which are now substantial. And fourth, I want a guilty plea. A guilty plea." "You cannot demand that. That is the DA's office." "I am not talking to the DA," I interrupted. "I am talking to you. This is my civil settlement. I want them to plead guilty to a lesser criminal charge. Something like conspiracy to commit fraudulent conveyance, a misdemeanor, perhaps, something that puts a permanent public stain on their record. That is my price to even consider asking the DA to show leniency on the felony charges. You have 2 hours." Gideon hesitated. He tried to counter. He offered more money. I said no. My price was his reputation. He waited too long. The ADA, now armed with the emails from Tessa's laptop, made his final move. He did not call me. He called Gideon's lawyer. He informed him that the grand jury was being convened, and then he added the final, crushing weight. "You should also know," the ADA said, "that as part of our investigation into Mr. Vale, we uncovered a similar scheme in Chicago from 2 years ago, and the co-conspirator in that deal, well, he has already flipped. He is testifying for us. We do not just have Mr. Vale on the Mercer deal, we have him on a pattern of racketeering." That was it. The house of cards collapsed. My phone rang. It was not Gideon's lawyer. It was Tessa's. He was hyperventilating. "She is flipping," he yelled into the phone. "Lila, she will testify. She will give you Gideon. She will tell the DA everything. She will be your star witness. Just help her. Get her out of this. She is terrified. She will do whatever you want." Tessa, the star, was finally ready to play the only role that could save her the victim. I paused. I could hear Tessa sobbing in the background. "No," I said. "What do you mean?" "No," her lawyer shrieked. "I do not want her testimony," I said. "It is worthless. She will lie. She will spin it. She will cry and say Gideon forced her. I am not interested. I will accept her cooperation on one condition. Anything. A full, sworn affidavit," I said. "I will draft it. It will detail everything. The day she decided to steal my identity, the fact that she knew the notary was dead, the conspiracy with Gideon to draft the confession of judgment, the plan to steal the TI allowance, the fraudulent W-9, everything. I want her to sign it, under oath. Subject to the penalties of perjury, I want her locked in." "She will do it," he whispered, defeated. We met an hour later in a sterile conference room at her lawyer's office. Tessa was a wreck. Her face was gray and puffy. She sat at one end of the table. I sat at the other. I placed the 12-page affidavit in front of her. "Read it, every word, then sign it," I said. She read it, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn the pages. She looked up at me, her eyes dead. "You have destroyed me," Lila, you have destroyed yourself. Tessa, I said. Sign it. She picked up the pen. Her lawyer, acting as the notary, stood over her. She signed the last page. Her signature, the real one, was a jagged, broken scrawl. Her lawyer stamped it. It is done, he said. The moment the notary seal pressed into the paper, my phone buzzed with a text from the ADA, whom I had alerted. We are moving. Tessa was still bent over the table, sobbing. The affidavit was legally executed. She had served her purpose. The door to the conference room opened, but it was not one of the firm's paralegals. It was two men in dark suits, with badges on their belts. They were not looking at Tessa. They were looking at her lawyer. We have a warrant for the arrest of Gideon Vale, one of them said. We have reason to believe he is in contact with you. We are also seizing all files related to his case under the crime-fraud exception to attorney-client privilege. Through the window, down in the street in front of Gideon's high-rise office building 2 blocks away, I saw them, the flashing blue and red lights, reflecting off the dark glass. Spinning and spinning, the trap was shut. The cogs had interlocked. The final hearing was not a trial. It was the formal reading of a surrender. We were back in Judge Thorne's courtroom, but the air of conflict was gone, replaced by a thick, sterile quiet. I took my place at the plaintiff's table. My parents sat in the front row directly behind me, a silent, unified presence that was still new. Across the aisle, Tessa sat with her criminal defense lawyer. She looked hollowed out, a sketch of her former self, drawn in shades of gray. She stared at the wood grain of the table as if it held a complex legal argument. Gideon Vale was not present. He was in federal holding, his arraignment on separate, more serious racketeering charges pending. His lawyer, the one who had tried to offer me $50,000 in silence money, was here to absorb the civil judgment on his client's behalf. Judge Thorne entered. The room rose and sat in a single, rustling motion. He put on his glasses. We are here to enter into the record the global consent judgment and stipulation in the civil matter of Barnes v. Mercer Collective, LLC. North Point Properties, et al. I have reviewed the agreement signed by all parties. I will read the key findings and orders into the record. His voice was a dispassionate monotone, a sound more final than any gavel. The court finds that the lease agreement for the Archer on Larkspur Penthouse was procured through acts of criminal forgery and aggravated identity theft. The court finds the defendant, Tessa Mercer, knowingly and willfully used the name, credit, and social security number of the plaintiff, Lila Barnes, without consent. Tessa flinched, a small, sharp movement, but did not look up. It is hereby ordered, the judge continued. The consent judgment is entered in favor of the plaintiff. Defendants Tessa Mercer and Gideon Vale are held jointly and severally liable for all legal, forensic, and associated fees incurred by the plaintiff, Lila Barnes, in this matter. Furthermore, based on her admission of fraudulent corporate filings, defendant Tessa Mercer is hereby enjoined from forming, managing, or serving as an officer or director of any corporate entity registered within this state for a period of 5 years. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. It was a corporate death sentence. The one thing she lived for, the performance of being a CEO, a founder, a visionary, was now legally impossible. Furthermore, Judge Thorne said, turning a page, the court accepts the filed rescission and mutual release agreement between North Point Properties, their lenders, and the plaintiff. The lease is declared void ab initio. It is a legal nullity. It never existed. The $30,000 deposit, currently in escrow, is to be returned to the landlord. The UCC-1 financing statement filed with the Secretary of State is ordered withdrawn and expunged from the record. He looked directly at me, over the rim of his glasses, and for the sake of absolute clarity, the personal guarantee, having been procured by fraud and attached to a nullity, is hereby declared void, unenforceable, and permanently dissolved. This civil matter is concluded. He struck the gavel, a single, sharp crack of wood, As I stood to pack my briefcase, the courtroom doors at the back opened. A marshal walked through, followed by Gideon Vale, his hands cuffed in front of him. He was not part of our hearing. He was simply being transported to his next proceeding. The timing was a masterpiece of bureaucratic coincidence. He was being paraded through the very courtroom where his civil empire had just been formally dismantled. His eyes, frantic and scanning, locked with mine for a fleeting second. I saw no remorse. I saw only the raw, animal panic of a predator caught in a trap, looking for an exit that did not exist. He looked away, and the doors closed behind him. I zipped my briefcase. It felt lighter. All the evidence, the affidavits, the metadata printouts, the deceased notary's record, the bank traces was gone, submitted to the court, forwarded to the district attorney. All that was left was my own copy of the file, now just a few pages thick. On top was the side letter Tessa had signed at the party. I had taken a red pen and drawn a single, clean line through it, and written in the margin, "Fraud voids everything." My parents were waiting for me in the aisle. My mother reached out and touched my arm. "Lila," she said. It was just my name. There was no, "you have to," or "for your sister" attached to it. It was just my name, spoken as if for the first time, from across the aisle. Tessa was moving toward me, her lawyer trying to stop her. "Lila, wait," she whispered. She stood in front of me, her face pale and puffy. She looked at our parents, then at me. She reached out her hand, trembling, a desperate, childish gesture, trying to grasp mine. She was looking for the safety net. I looked at her hand. I did not pull away. I did not flinch. But I did not take it. I simply stood, unmoving, and let her hand hover in the empty space between us until it, and she, finally fell back, defeated. The assistant district attorney was by the main door. He had observed the entire proceeding. He met my gaze. "Ms. Barnes," he said, giving me a short, professional nod. "We will handle the rest from here." The sentencing for Tessa, who had taken a plea on the lesser charges in exchange for her sworn affidavit, and the full felony trial for Gideon, were his. My work was done. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. An automated email from my credit monitoring service. The subject line, "Your credit file has been updated." I opened it. "The hard inquiry from North Point Properties has been removed. The fraud alert on your account has been closed as resolved. Your file is clear." I put the phone away. I turned toward the exit. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung open, and the sound of the vast marble-floored lobby echoed in. I stepped through. I walked past my parents, who followed me silently. I walked past the marshals and the clerks. I walked to the head of the great stone staircase that led down to the lobby and the main entrance. The massive bronze doors of the courthouse were propped open. Bright, unfiltered midday sunlight poured in, hitting the dust motes in the air, creating a solid, brilliant column of light. I stopped, just for half a beat. I stood at the top of the steps, looking into the light. I felt the tension of the last few weeks, the cold, precise anger, the weight of my family's history, the strain of the legal fight finally unspool and dissolve. I adjusted the strap of my briefcase on my shoulder. I stepped down, and the light hit my face. I walked out of the courthouse and into the noise of the city. I did not look back. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect and share our thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.